Hi, I'm Rob.
And I'm Rob.
And this is Ask Rob and Rob.
Welcome to Ask Rob and Rob. Good to have you here as we're just about to answer 2 more questions from wonderful listeners just like you. If you've got a question about property, the economy or business or anything tangentially related to what we talk about on this show, then don't keep it to yourself. Send it our way. And this is how you do it.
Yes, indeedy. You can give us a call and leave us a voicemail by ringing or dialing 013 808 0035, or you can go to propertyhub.net/ask and leave us a recording that way. Super simple. Obviously it is, because we've done hundreds of these episodes. And it appears at least 2 people have cracked the format this week, and we start with Maddie.
Hey Rob and Rob, Maddie here. Been listening to your podcast for the last few months, binge through all of the prior episodes, and I've got a question about what is the sweet spot in terms of rental income percentage if you're trying to make the leap from, salaried jobs into the rental income supporting you. So I'm a couple of years into my investment journey. I've got 4 properties now, and they span, got a self-contained flat, small to up 2 downs, and we're just about to complete on a larger sort of family property for our rental portfolio. And we're getting quite close to the profit sort of meeting our needs to live. But I'm very conscious that that doesn't give any buffer for maintenance, problems in the properties. And I was wondering, from your perspective, would that be 10%, 20%, 25% of rental income? How much would you hold back in that fund to ensure that you can live and pay all your bills, but also ensure that there's no issues with the properties? Okay, thank you.
Maddie, thank you for the question, and what a great situation you're in. Well done. We had a similar question last week in terms of emergency funds, which was coming at it from a different perspective, but the core question was very similar. So definitely go back and listen to that one, because Rob gave some great thoughts there. As part of that answer last week, Rob talked about the portfolio you've got and sort of what kind of typical expenses you could expect to have on that, and also size of portfolio, because obviously if you've got 20 properties, it's highly unlikely that something will go wrong in all of them at once, whereas if you've got 2, it's more likely. So those are all factors that you'll want to think about, but it is a very portfolio specific answer. What I would say though is that your situation is a little bit different, because we're talking about a scenario here where rental income is your only source of income, or will be your only source of income, which means that there's a possibility that you have a big expense that you weren't expecting. Therefore, you can't pull the money out of your portfolio that you wanted to, and therefore you can't pay your own bills. And that's not a situation you want to be in. So I would say that whatever the range is, and it always is a range because you don't know exactly what your costs are going to be, it's worth going for the upper end of that range to be safe, because you are putting yourself in a vulnerable position. And that's actually the other point that I'd make here. You are voluntarily putting yourself in a vulnerable position if you are cutting off all your salaried income and you'll have just rental income. Is that something you really want to do? Maybe it is. If it's your dream to go off and travel the world, then great. I mean, it's amazing if property can do that for you. I'm sure you can find a way of making that work. But many people don't like either their specific job, or they don't like the lack of flexibility of traditional employment. And therefore, replacing that with rental income is super attractive. But if you're not going to be going off and traveling the world, or looking after a relative who needs full-time care or something like that, then does it have to be as black and white as that? Is there a way that you can go part-time? Is there a way that you can establish another source of income that's either more flexible, or that's actually so fun that you enjoy it, that it's something that you want to spend your time doing? Because unless you're doing one of those things I mentioned earlier, if all you're doing is living off your rents, then you've got nothing to do all day. But there are plenty of things that you can fill your time with that do just so happen, or can just so happen, to bring in money in some form or other. So it's impossible for me to say what's a good idea for you and what's not, because I don't know you beyond this message. But I think what I would be doing in this situation is seeing if I could make a bit more of a phased transition. Maybe rather than going to completely relying on rental income, go part-time, or save up a really healthy emergency fund. And so I've got like a year's runway, and use that time to try and get a little part-time business off the ground. So I've got some more money coming in. That's how I think about this question, Maddie. But obviously everyone's going to have a different perspective. So what you do is up to you, but hopefully you found something in there useful or thought-provoking in some kind of way.
Great answer, Rob. Maddie, I'm sure you'll do very well if you follow Mr. D's advice there. Right, next up we have a question in from Gazi.
Hello, Rob and Rob. My name's Gazi, and I'd like to thank you firstly for your content. It really does help us. And my question for you today is, with the increase in living costs and obviously with the uncertainty of the market, does it make sense to do a property flip? Obviously, where this would be my first property flip, I was a bit hesitant on whether I should do the flip or not. And if it does make sense to do it, how do I mitigate that risk through the exit strategies? Because with the high interest rates, people might not want to buy the property, is what I'm assuming. So, thank you.
This is a brilliant question, Gazi. Last week on Ask Rob and Rob, we talked about how if you're investing for the long term, you shouldn't be as sensitive to being fearful of what the market may or may not do, because ultimately you'll be rewarded over the long term if you're buying a good deal. But if you're flipping a property, which is just buying it, doing it up and selling it, then you are going to be more sensitive to what's happening to the market in the short term. But it doesn't mean you can't implement this strategy. You just have to implement it well. And what do I mean by that? Well, lots of people in the last market cycle, as the market boomed, were doing flips. And you may remember a show on the TV, it felt like nearly every night, called Property Ladder. And Sarah Beanie would go around, watch people do refurbs. Often they'd mess it up halfway through, ignore her advice, and then they get to the end and find out how much they've made. And nearly in every scenario, people made money. But what was really interesting is that Sarah Beanie looked at the market and said to what felt like to the majority of those investors, if you'd actually done nothing with the property, you would have made as much. So basically, the money you'd invested hadn't really added any value. And that's because the market had looked after them, because it kept going up and up and up. That is not flipping. That is just luck and using the market to help you increase your wealth. It's actually wasting your time, because you could have not done all the refurb and made as much by just holding the property. So when you do a flip, you should look at the numbers and make an assumption that the market is not going to move at all, and it's not going to help you out. And you have to be super disciplined, even if the market is moving in the background in your favour, and bring that job in for the cost that you've laid out, so you can sell it for the price that you think it's worth after that work. And your research will help you know if it will be worth that amount or not. It should be a healthy profit margin as well. So if the market is flat, you'll make that profit. And if it goes in your favour, then you'll make more. But if it goes against you, hopefully that margin is enough to mitigate against the losses. So you might not make money, but hopefully you won't lose money. Now, if the worst case scenario does take place and the market happens to fall apart and you can't sell it for even no profit whatsoever, you may be willing to take a small loss. But perhaps you should also consider, will this property convert to a buy-to-let and be profitable as a buy-to-let if I needed to? And I think that's your safety net, is look at the property and go, okay, in a worst case scenario, could I convert this into a standard buy-to-let, let it rent out for a number of years until the market recovers, and then sell it? That's your final safety net. But discipline with your numbers at the beginning and making sure you are buying a really good deal in the first place, and you've got your numbers bob on, will mean that a lot of the risk is taken away of any market corrections in the short term.
Great answer there. And that brings us to the end of another Ask Rob and Rob. 2 more questions dispatched. But I'm sure you've got questions of your own, so do send them in. 013 808 88835 or propertyhub.net/ask are your ways of doing that. Won't be long until our next podcast, Thursday, in fact, and it's going to be a good one. So do make sure you join us then. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.